Often regarded as one of the driest countries on the African continent, Namibia is blessed with amazing natural beauty and contrasting landscapes. The vegetation occurring throughout the country can loosely be categorized into areas of woodlands, savannas and deserts. A delicate balance exists between these ecosystems that, if not cared for, threaten the sustainability of the life they currently support. In this film, we reach out to experts who help us paint a picture to better understand the importance of trees and plant life in our young nation of Namibia, and also to help us identify the environmental problems that we are facing and the cause of these problems. We will also investigate what many Namibians are doing today to help our environment to remain unique and diverse. And, as you will see, it is a story that involves you.
Although we don't have the forests that everyone imagines, and a lot of Namibia doesn't have large trees, but we do have a lot of plant resources, and many of them valuable. We have many endemic species, particularly in your drier areas. You have lots of endemics, which are special.
If you move through Namibia, east to west or north to south, you see a change of vegetation occurring. Most of Namibia is what we call bushland, or you can call it shrub savanna, and simply because the rainfall is so low, below 300, 400 millimeter, and only in the northeastern parts of the country where we have rainfall of more than 500 or 600 millimeter, those are the places where we have dense forest, or maybe what somebody from outside would consider a forest developing. We do not consider forest management to be a management strategy where you only look to trees, where you only think now we should protect the trees and there should be only trees. No, it should be a healthy mix of trees, shrubs and grassland, so that you actually can optimize the ecosystem functions and also the benefits for the local people.
Namibia recognized that. I think that's very forward-looking, and passed legislation, more than 10 years ago now, it's like 13 years ago now, where this legislation guarantees the people in that area the right to use those resources sustainably.
Under the current forestry legislation, grasses are considered to be a part of that legislation, so once a community forest is registered, farmers then do have the right to manage grasses, which means you have the right to manage rangelands in the broader perspective.
What we're really doing is helping government to implement the legislation and policy that's already in place. With the conservancies, there's been legislation since 1996. With the community forests, there's legislation that supports it. And as NGOs, we're really just a support organisation to help communities and government to implement the legislation which exists.
And when we offer support for forest management, means we offer support to manage that sort of whole range of different vegetation types, supporting the people in managing this, trying to generate income from this, try to protect important types of vegetation if they are of importance to wildlife habitats, for example.
Namibia has developed maybe the best program in the world for commercializing products from indigenous plants. We did it partly because we don't have that many alternative opportunities, but we also did it because we do have a large environment where there aren't many alternatives to compete for land uses.
There are excellent conservation initiatives already in place to support Namibia's trees, plants and environment. But there are still many challenges that need to be addressed.
the past 30, 40 years I'm observing the forest cover, and there are quite significant changes in the forest cover in Namibia. Traditionally, people have been using quite big amount of wood to make their homesteads.
We have roughly about 8 million hectares of natural forest in the country here, and we have a forest loss of about 1% per year, which is about 80,000 hectares then. And farmers are telling us that they face more and more problems in terms of lack of rain or long drought seasons or maybe extreme flooding, things like this. So it seems that these sort of climate events become much more pronounced in recent years, and that there's a problem, there's something happening which is not good.
Along with deforestation, Namibia is also troubled with another serious challenge. A challenge which right now threatens our nation's livelihood.
The thing about global climate change is that it's very difficult to predict its effects in any one particular place, including in Namibia. And because Namibia already has such a very variable climate, you have some models that say it will get wetter and some say it will get drier. But one thing that they all agree on is that it will get more variable. So what will probably happen is that we'll have more droughts, more longer spells of drought, and heavier rainfall when we do have rainfall.
Very light soils in northern Namibia, which are fairly low inherent fertility anyway, those nutrients are being further depleted by the practices which the farmers are forced for their very survival to practice in mining the soil, means that those nutrients are not available. And another practice that makes things even worse is the preparation of land after the onset of the rains using heavy tractor equipment and disc harrows.
Interestingly, the number of cattle have halved since the 1950s. And this is not because farmers in Namibia have reduced cattle and replaced them with wildlife because they wanted to change to wildlife. The rangeland no longer supports that number of livestock, and there is less and less grass available year on year. And this degradation is taking place in the communal areas, it's taking place in the commercial areas, and to some extent in our national parks.
While facing the challenges of climate and environmental change, Namibia, with its dry woodlands, is also often confronted with one of nature's most destructive forces.
I mean, fire is a bit of a, I want to say, controversial issues. There are different opinions. Some people say fire is a bad thing, it should be prevented by all means, because whenever something burns, it poses a threat, a danger, it destroys things. We are currently in the process of establishing controlled fire management schemes where we burn areas in the early dry season, because whatever vegetation is destroyed in a controlled way cannot burn later. And the problem is, if fires occur in the late dry season, they are what we call hot fires. They burn very intensively, and these fires of course can get easily out of hand and can then extend into other areas where maybe you have your crop farms, where maybe you have your valuable resources. But fire serves also a lot of positive purposes. After all, a natural dry forest, as we find them here in Namibia, is an ecosystem that depends on fire. If you take it completely out, you would change the ecosystem. And some of the species are very well adapted to fire.
If we did not have control burning, what will happen is it will be loss of grazing, and there will be too much bush encroachment. And we are trying to improve up the grazing areas for our livestock and also our wildlife.
It is clear that our nation is faced with enormous challenges as far as our trees and plant life is concerned. You should, however, not feel hopeless, as we will now explore what Namibia is doing to preserve its precious plant heritage.
What makes conservation in Namibia really special is our community-based natural resource management programs. because those are based on a very radical concept of actually giving local communities a legal right to manage natural resources and to benefit from the sustainable use of managing those resources.
And that's a unique model in this world. We're routinely getting awards all over the world for our conservancy model. We call it community-based natural resource management.
A community forest, it can be defined as the area which is falling under the communal land in Namibia in order to manage the areas and to give the rights to the community members.
What is good about all this is that there is a plan that has been put in place. This forest was counted. There is a process we call participatory community forest inventory, where the communities are trained in how to count these forest resources, and out of that a management plan is put in place. And in that management plan there is what we call an allowable harvest, an annual allowable harvest, which indicates how many poles or how much timber that particular community forest can be allowed to harvest in a year.
Now we need to protect the existing trees we have and also to plant trees in those areas, because if you go to the grassland area, you will find some of the woodlots where we planted trees, and those trees are doing very well. And we are raising seedlings in our own nurseries, and we are also promoting the community to raise their own seedlings in their home nurseries.
So far we have got a lot of areas which we have done tree plantings. The trees which we are planting, we consider more on the fruit species, so that the communities and the people also in general in Namibia can eat those fruits.
And it is very important that all the Namibian people should really consider adopting the tree planting culture.
Already in Namibia's young history, we can see that we have a conservation plan and that trees are being planted to provide food for us in the future. But trees are not the only important part of Namibia's natural landscape. Let's take a closer look at what Namibians are doing to preserve nature, what solutions there are, and why these are essential to the future of our country.
The indigenous people of Namibia have developed a really deep understanding of the usefulness of their natural resources, and especially of their plants. In the Kavango region, for example, there's documented uses for over 325 species of plants, where people know what's good for. And starting in the early 1960s, Namibia has been exporting dried devil's claw tubers, mainly to Germany, but also to other European countries, and a little bit less going to the rest of the world. And in modern medicine, it is used as a treatment for arthritis. And the thing that makes it very attractive is that it doesn't have any side effects. The second example that's a very good one is the marula nuts, which we use to produce oil. That project started in 1994. It now involves about 7,000 women in the north-central regions. They own a factory in Ondangwa that presses the oil.
The body shop uses marula oil, which they buy from Namibia. We can't even keep up with the demand for the marula oil, that it's wanted so much.
The Comifera enterprise is functional in 5 conservancies. It's the conservancy where the resources are present. It's one Comifera species, Comifera wildii. There are many species, but one is used traditionally by a Hemba woman for their perfume. Now the interesting thing about the Comifera in Namibia, Comifera wildii, or the umumbiri, is the umumbiri exudes the resin naturally. And traditionally, the women have always harvested resin off the rocks or off the bark or even off the ground below the trees. So the trees are not damaged in any way.
In terms of community forestry, we are supporting currently very much the use of dead wood for firewood. And in some areas even we are able to saw planks out of dead wood. But of course that depends always on the quality of the resource available in a specific area.
There's a common invasive bush that is very common in Namibia. We call it the Acacia mellifera. Basically what this does is minimize the grazing of cattle on the farms. The farmer then cuts out the invasive bush, make charcoal from it, and then send it to us. So he gets rid of the problem, which is the invasive bush, but again benefit from it because we accept his invasive bush.
In Namibia, what you find most is the open fire that people are using for cooking, and that is the culture that has been on for very long. And even if you look at a lot of women in rural areas, they have to travel long distances to collect wood, and we are talking about 3 to 4 kilometers. We have scarcity of firewood currently, and a bunch of wood in Namibia is very expensive. So if you look at the option like the turtle stove, it's more efficient because it uses less wood and it cooks fast.
In cropping, the trees are very important. A lot of the indigenous trees are leguminous, and that they are nitrogen fixing, and their leaf drop is very good fertilizer. Of course, a lot of these trees are utilized for firewood and for fencing.
Instead of using 10 poles at only 3 meters, adopting maybe wire fences properly, because if you have a wire to fence off your field and put the wood in a way that the animal cannot go through, and then by doing that you reduce the number of wood.
Turning to the Namibia-specific application of what we call ripper furrowing, which allows us to combat two of the difficulties that we face in Namibia and challenges, and that is that we have to break this hard pan for root penetration, and we have to look seriously at in-field water harvesting and convert an annual precipitation of about 350 millimeters to something like 500. So this enables the crop to survive a drought situation better than it would have been otherwise because of the added moisture and for the fact that it has a deeper root system.
This method of ripper furrowing, or at least the process of introducing this method, must be speeded up so that we can improve the yields and prevent starvation.
Plants give the poorest people in the community an opportunity to use their labor to benefit from an existing natural resource that's there already. That's in a way a legacy that has been left to them by their forefathers.
Namibia is proud that we do not sustain our economy on foreign aid. On less than 11% of our national budget, it comes from donor aid. We pay for our own. But that's because we have to sustainably use the wealth that the land is blessed with to address national priorities for growth and development.
The key to unlocking the potential of the private sector is to form real partnerships between the rural people who have to actually do the day-to-day conservation and the private sector that can help those people to earn an income from sustainable use. And if there's a real partnership between the resource managers and the resource marketers, everyone can benefit in that value chain. Everyone makes money and the environment benefits. That's what you call the triple bottom line, isn't it? It's win-win and the environment wins too.
So what we need is actually we have to come together, the main decision makers in Namibia, the different ministries, the different NGOs, but I think also the different donors who are actually supporting all those initiatives with money, have to come together and try to support a process, yeah, you could call it integrated land use planning, whereby you determine what is best under certain conditions, and not to look exclusively at conservation interests or productivity interests and so on, but to bring these different perspectives together, and then to have basically at least, I would say, at least a master plan for each region, so that you know that those and those areas should be predominantly utilized for community-based resource management, but then also that other areas are good areas to be developed as farmland and so on.
The communities have seen the benefit that they can get from conservation at large, and they also embrace the concept of ownership over the natural resources.
A major intervention is required at a national level to address the extension services, to address awareness of the general farming population, and to build a culture of addressing and finding solutions to these problems and giving grass plants what they really need. If we can achieve that and we can improve productivity over time, I think we're going to see a wealthier country.
Namibia has already, in a very short time, developed a reputation for being reliable, for delivering on what we say we're going to deliver, and I think we need to maintain that. So I see this really as just the start of a process which will hopefully get much bigger and bring benefits to a lot more communal residents, and especially to the women who manage those resources.
We understand that economic, political and social stability is critical for a booming tourism sector. So if we know that by creating these jobs and bringing employment opportunities, but also training opportunities, career opportunities into communities where there's nothing, this lends to the economic stability, which in turn allows us to have a higher profit margin in the bigger picture.
I think the commercial success of indigenous natural plant products is a very good example of sustainable use, and how sustainable use becomes a driver for conservation.
The future is very bright. As I said, we are still continuously training our community members, so especially the forest management committees, so that they are really independent and they can see, they can visualize and see what are the real benefits.
I'm really happy with what is happening now at the community forest. The people are really catching up quickly. They are learning things quickly because we train them and they come back to their community, they inform their community people.
You can make a difference and contribute to conservation while still benefiting on a personal level.
Within that context, we know now that the sustainable use of our indigenous natural resources is actually one of our most valuable national assets for economic development.
Well, I think our natural environment is very complex by nature, so are the interests of the people who depend on it. If we really want to be effective, I believe we have to work together, to cooperate, to make a difference.
Although there are many challenges that threaten our environment, we have seen that there are plans and strategies already in place to address these problems. And we have seen that trees play an essential role in forming part of the solution. It has also become clear that if we use these plant resources in our daily lives, we must be aware of how we live and think of ways how we can use these resources in a sustainable manner. There remains just one question that needs to be answered to complete Namibia's picture of trees on a canvas. In preserving Namibia's environment, will you be part of our success story?